It was suspected at the time that the official totals of plague dead were actually underestimates of the true picture.
It is feared that the true number of dead this week is nearer 10,000, from the poor that cannot be taken notice of through the greatness of the number.
The bills often conceal plague deaths, so the figures may have been much higher than those actually recorded. After all, if you have plague in your community, you're not going to advertise the fact to the world unless you can help it.
And certainly if we reflect on contemporary stuff, I would hate to think the sort of social catastrophe that would take place in 20th century sophisticated culture if a quarter of the London population went down with some mysterious disease in the space of 3 months.
By the summer, London was a different place. Some 200,000 people had fled, most of them of the better sort.
I say in the continent they have much stricter mechanisms much earlier on. They have a much more sophisticated system of plague hospitals, for example, where people are transported quite early on in the outbreaks of the disease. Now, in London, that's not done so much. The facilities aren't available.
It was an amazing self-control, amazing sort of dignity in these communities. One can imagine today if, 20% of urban London population died in the space of 3 to 4 months. This town would be a ruin. There would be riots and God knows what. But in early modern London, these were sort of self-disciplined individuals who struggled and made a life. The plague is not really a medical problem for government and for civic officers. It's a problem of order. Controlling the sort of areas of sociability, playhouses, pubs, to make sure that the healthy and the unhealthy didn't mingle.
In an attempt to halt the spread of infection, pubs were closed down. The Alley lost its tavern, and William Gurney, the publican, lost part of his livelihood.
How will you live? Where will you go? If you flee London and end up in a parish, say in Surrey or in Middlesex, many of those localities will not want to receive the poor, marginal vagrant because they'll have to feed them.
Preventatives intended to ward off the plague were everywhere. The Royal College of Physicians printed a list of recipes that were thought to do the job. One set for the rich, one for the poor. One recipe, for the richer sort, called for 24 grams of unicorn's horn. Another prescribed 3 drams of laudanum, that's opium dissolved in brandy.
Bockhurst writes about having a mastiff at the breast of a woman in order to protect her against the plague. And this must seem to us to be one of the wildest and weirdest ideas about disease. But in fact, it's heir to a long medieval tradition, which is that you apply an animal to one of your lower extremities usually, often a decapitated pigeon or cock, and that sucks out the corrupt humours from your body through the pores and makes you fit. So there is a logic behind it, albeit one we would find rather bizarre. A few people have this idea that if you get yourself infected with syphilis or the pox, that will prevent you from being infected by plague. And the rationale behind this is quite logical. You use one poison to drive out another poison.
I think the legacy of the interregnum, the world turned upside down, would have meant that some people responded to this sort of catastrophe by saying, well, stuff it, this is the end of the world. And if you're a poor person and you've got to spend all day, chucking dead bodies into a graveyard, I imagine at the end of the day you probably want a bit of a drink and a smoke, and you may not get out of bed too early in the morning.
There is also a pneumonic version of the plague that attacks the lungs. It's spread by coughs and sneezing, and is the unexpectedly grisly inspiration for the famous rhyme.
Ah!